it is equally important to discuss as other networks, default mode network, salience network. This network is really, really important because it is underutilized by most people in the sense that their default mode network is running rampant, their attention is out of control, their attention is too narrow focused, they're so stuck on things that are negative in their life, whether it's thoughts, behaviors, sense of self, language, all those different things, that they miss out on this ability to problem solve things in a deeper, more insight focused method. And unfortunately, that's exactly what you need to find freedom from psychological suffering. So until you train those things and make this realization that there's more to understanding information than just the basis of knowledge and narrow-based attention, it's going to be too difficult to realize what you need to find freedom from psychological suffering and to realize awakening. So the central executive network is a brain network that reflects those kinds of functions. Okay, we are taking our attention and we are expanding it. I will talk about this in a later set of videos, but if you want to look at hemispheric differences between the brain, the left and right hemisphere, we find that as you apply more attention in a very correlative fashion, the activity of the right hemisphere also increases in a very similar fashion. But we're talking about brain networks here, so I'll stick to that. As you apply more attention, the central executive network becomes more active. The default mode network becomes less active. And I'm sure you've all experienced this before, perhaps without even knowing it. You feel very contemplative. You feel very deep in your thought process, like you are reflecting on something. And perhaps this may or may not have happened, but it does happen when you engage in proper meditative practices. You start to analyze information through the basis of nonverbal imagery as opposed to verbal thought processes. These kinds of images come up, and as you're doing this, as you're engaging your attention properly, you will find that insights come to you. These insights are certain generalized understandings of a series of problems that you might be having. It's kind of hard to put this into words because the entire process is nonverbal, but I'll try my best here. And this is actually the goal of many different meditative practices, in the sense that you are training what it is you need to understand reality in the proper way. So we are training a different way to understand information and to problem solve. So when you do this, and those insights come to you, you can start to, this is another really important thing about the central executive network, it applies attention towards problem solving. So when you raise this problem of what do I need to find freedom from psychological suffering, and as I've mentioned before, you can understand that there are roots, causes, and there are ways to stop or end psychological suffering. When you contemplate through the basis of insight and this central executive network and high focused attention, what are those exact characteristics I need? You will start to get insights and answers so long as you can maintain that proper meditative practice. Again, this is really hard to put into words, but those answers kind of come to you. They come to you in a complete sense. I've mentioned this before in other videos. I'll try to give a different example here, but it's kind of like when you try to understand how to make a cake and you memorize all the different steps that are involved with making a cake. And then you try to put it together. Sort of works, sort of doesn't work. It's not ideal. And then you go through and you keep reading through those instructions, but eventually you get a deeper understanding. Like, this is the way the flour goes. This is the way the eggs go. This is how I put it together. When you get that deeper understanding, those things you cannot find on the back of the box in terms of the verbal instructions, and you get that deeper aha moment, that's what I'm talking about. You can apply that same thing through meditative practices and to the problems of psychological suffering. When you do this, the central executive network is just like target training. You are applying your attention towards the center of that target. You are seeing the heart of the problem. You are seeing how these things arise and how they fall. You will see this in spiritual practices as well, in terms of how they describe things. In Buddhism, they talk about how one of the key things needed to find enlightenment is to realize the Four Noble Truths, right? There is dukkha, there is a cause, there is a way to end it, and it is this eightfold path. Those are all insights that the Buddha found through his practices. And you can do the exact same thing. These are capabilities that are within the realm of normal human experience. It's not something special or reserved for a select few. You have this capability, but you have to train it, because our brain networks are trained in such a way that central executive network and all these different functions, they are underutilized. When they're underutilized, we know that the brain, there's a famous saying from, I believe it's Donald Hebb, neurons that fire together, wire together. So when you train the brain in a certain way, it's going to connect in a similar fashion and reinforce what you train it to do. If you train yourself to be narrow-focused in attention, if you're going through social media and flipping through things and your attention isn't more than a few seconds, yeah, it's going to be diffracted. You're going to have a hard time. But you can also train things the other way, and that's where these meditative approaches come from. Meditation is just the ability to focus your attention towards attaining different goals or different psychological functions. That's really all it is. When you apply your attention, you're training the central executive network, and more importantly, you are training your ability to switch between these different networks. And when you do this, when you can maintain your attention for a while, you will see things in nonverbal imagery, the mental chatter, the sense of self, these individual thoughts, the ruminations, these things will silence out. And you will feel a sense of merging, or kind of like being a flat screen observer of the content of your experience. And when these nonverbal images come up, it's really, really hard to explain these things. I'm trying my best here. When these nonverbal images come up, you can't attach to them too much, because when you start to do that, you lose this sense of having attention properly oriented. When attention is too fixated, you get stuck in things, and then you start to go through verbal processes again, and your attention becomes too narrowed. But when you have your attention there and you're not attached to what you're seeing, but you let the nonverbal imagery play through, kind of like channels on a TV, the insights come as well. And these insights, you will suddenly get them. When you suddenly get them, you can contemplate those as well. When you contemplate these things, they will be refined over time as you sit there in meditation and practice. And you will know the insights you get are useful when you are able to realize that these insights do in fact lead to the end of psychological suffering. That's what we're most interested in talking about here. You know they lead to the end of psychological suffering because you find something that is stable for yourself. You find a stability that does not go away, and you find a stability that stays with you no matter what it is you're going through life. And when this stabilization is with you, it never goes away, no matter what you're experiencing, that means you're on the right track, and you are very close to finding what it is you need to find to realize this end of psychological suffering. So in essence, if you are not intimately familiar with brain networks, I would highly recommend researching these three, understanding the mechanisms of action that are at play, and then looking through spiritual literatures to see how these networks are explained from the first person experience, right? In a state of mental quietness where chatter of the mind is minimalized or completely gone, and this sense of self is lost, and there is just a single continuous experience, and the mind is still, and imagery of a nonverbal nature is experienced in such a manner that your attention is just correctly orbiting around what is happening. Wording like that, right? Those are all descriptions of retraining your brain to silence some of those default mode network activities, increasing central executive network activities, and also the salience network in terms of filtering out certain stimuli and attending to other stimuli, right? We're filtering out verbal activity. We are filtering in nonverbal. So research those things if you're not super familiar, put them into practice. Again, this is the most important thing. I know I say it a lot, but I can't emphasize it enough, especially in this line of information, because it is so easy to BS somebody. Only accept what you can validate for yourself. When you truly go through these things and you realize for yourself, okay, there is a basis of practice where I can gain insights and I can question these insights because insights are not always correct, and I can refine them and I can see things in a way and experience things in a way that alleviates my psychological suffering. When you validate those things for yourself in the truest and realest sense, then you know for sure there's nobody else who can question you. There's nothing that can contradict. If it works in the way that you intend it to work, and it works over time, and it's stable, and it does what it does, you are on a very good track to finding these answers for yourself. So again, I encourage you to practice and research, correct knowledge, correct practice, hone these things for yourself. I will give more details as time goes on, and good luck.